Across North America, there are millions of abandoned oil and gas wells that are sitting untouched. Some of them, they release methane. That's an invisible gas that affects everything from public safety to climate to you. The question really is, if we know so many of these wells still exist, why are they still untouched?
This is just an open hole.
Everyone knows that you're supposed to clean up your mess when you're done.
Some of these wells are very hazardous, and we just didn't know that.
The scale of the problem is hard to wrap one's mind around.
Carbon dioxide is like high blood pressure. Methane or other super pollutants is like a heart attack.
Why? What's the solution? And who's taking responsibility?
There's a niche here that not a lot of other people have the ability to attack.
I'm Lindsay Melchick. Follow along as we sit with Zefiro, a company who has actually created a solution for this.
That's right here, yeah.
You know, our mantra has always been, we will find a way, we will figure it out.
As we speak with somebody who has been personally affected right here on his land.
There's nothing protecting the aquifer, nothing. That's scary dangerous, yes.
And we talk with researchers and specialists who actually can tell you about the effects of what's been left behind.
This is a life and death issue, ultimately.
Let's go take a look.
All over the United States, buried deep underground in forests, under farmlands, even in residential areas, there are hidden remains of a time when oil and gas extraction wasn't as regulated as it is today.
Of the 4 million wells that were drilled since the 1850s, around 1.5 million have been plugged. Maybe 800,000 to 1 million are currently active, and that leaves a pretty large gap of wells that are no longer productive but haven't been plugged. Some of those wells have a responsible party who could theoretically be required to plug the well, but a lot of them don't. And so that's where orphan wells come in.
Adam Peltz is the director and senior attorney of the Environmental Defense Fund, a global nonprofit. They work to solve critical environmental problems like climate change and pollution. Depending on how states define orphaned, the number of documented orphan wells in the U.S. ranges from 120,000 to 800,000. Reports from the Environmental Defense Fund and United States Geological Survey indicate that they are just a subset of an estimated 2 to 4 million total inactive, unplugged or undocumented wells across the country. And many of these wells weren't properly sealed. However, there is a company that wants to address this exact problem.
Luke, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi,
I'm
Lindsay. Nice to meet you as well. Welcome to Bradford, Pennsylvania.
Welcome to Zefiro.
Welcome to Zefiro.
You see, every company has an origin story. This one began in 1970 when the founder Paul Plantz and his partner George Goodwin spent their mornings working on aging oil and gas wells, before even clocking in for a second shift at factories. In the early 1980s, Luke's dad recognized the opportunity to transform that side job into a dedicated service company built to serve the region. Today, Luke Plantz is the CEO of Plantz & Goodwin, a Zefiro company.
So as things evolved over time, we really began being engaged in the plugging of old legacy wells just because we have generations of experience working on these sorts of old wells.
Yeah.
And that's where the light bulb really went off in my head, that there's a niche here that not a lot of other people have the ability to attack. And that's when we really began to focus in on being this modular, turnkey, horizontally integrated plugging company that can service everything from wells that were drilled in the 1800s all the way up to a well that was just drilled yesterday but now no longer has economic value but maybe still original reservoir pressure on it.
For Luke, orphan wells aren't just a business, they're personal. He tells me years ago his father purchased a piece of land only to discover it came with dozens of abandoned oil and gas wells right on it. Left improperly decommissioned, those forgotten wells became a first-hand reminder of the lasting environmental impact they could leave behind.
They've pretty much ruined the freshwater supply, the groundwater in this area. And it's namely because the group that drilled them went out of business many years ago, and now we're just sort of left with these unplugged wells.
Most landowners won't even talk about the abandoned wells on their property. The leaks aren't always limited to methane or oil either, and the problems can be far more complicated than they appear.
There's also some just real carcinogens that can be in place, like benzene, for instance. There could be high levels of benzene in certain natural gas, and that can be cancerous if you have long-term exposure to it.
But in this case, I get to hear the whole story.
Mr. Steve?
Yes.
I'm Lindsay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for inviting us onto your property.
Sure, thanks for coming up.
I mean, this is a big story, and there's a lot of happening, so it's good that we're out here and we get to have a little bit more education and see that's what's happening firsthand.
Right.
After only a short walk, we reached the first well.
You can smell it in the air already.
Right.
Just already.
So we're going to cut right down through here.
Okay.
And go down here and we'll find that well. So the well's right out here in these ferns.
I mean, it's such a beautiful area. It's even more heart-wrenching to see that this is what's happening.
Exactly. So you can see.
You can smell, it's so strong. Look at this, just bubbling. It's like boiling water.
So that's gas bubbling up through the water and into the atmosphere. And you can only imagine how much of that, because there is an obstruction in there. There's, who knows, mud or whatever. It's probably was somebody attempted to plug it at one point. I don't know. But the fact that it's leaking, you know, you have to assume that there's gas pressure down in there which could also be going out into the fresh water vein, which is a big problem.
So the smell is so strong. Wow.
And there it is, just sitting there. Rusting, quietly releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. It's easy to overlook, but its impact is anything but small, and with no one left to hold accountable, the burden of decades-old problem remains.
You know, this is the model of orphan wells, is that the owner is deceased, the previous owner gone, there's no viable financial mechanisms for that owner or any of his descendants to come back and fix these wells, so then they're just wards of the state.
These kinds of wells are all over the U.S., their number higher than one would expect.
The current count of documented orphan wells in the United States is around 141,000, with estimates of 800,000 plus undocumented orphan wells. And then there's many more wells on top of that that are in kind of a legal limbo where they probably are orphan wells, but the state or the Federal Land Management Agency or the tribe hasn't gone through a process to say, okay, this needs to be plugged and there's actually no one here who has the money to do it, and thus needs to be declared orphaned. And so the scale of the problem is hard to wrap one's mind around.
And they're not easy to detect. No orphan well is the same, and each one has its own risks. You see, right now, over 2.2 million abandoned end-of-life wells are sitting in the United States.
The interesting thing about the next one we're going to look at is it looks nothing like this because all of the pipe has been removed. So it's actually way more dangerous than one like this because it's just a gaping hole in the ground.
Okay, let's go see this.
Okay.
It's wild.
From inside the woods, we hike across a pasture where cattle graze and a small creek flows nearby. At first glance, nature looks untouched.
So what are we coming up to here?
So this is
it.
the second well. This one is, as I said before, is actually more dangerous than the previous one because all of the casing and the conductor pipe has been pulled out.
Whoa.
So it's just a cave hole in the ground. And as you can see, it goes down
who knows how long?
Well, it certainly goes down to the freshwater vein.
I don't have the same fumes that I had from the
Right,
other
so
one.
this
Why?
well, I don't believe is leaking gas, at least not to surface. But that's what I was talking about, why this one is more dangerous, not only because of the open hole, but there's nothing protecting the aquifer, nothing. There's no pipe in this well to protect it at all.
At least even if you have a stick of degraded casing in the well, there's still a chance that anything that's coming up will still be held inside that casing.
Absolutely.
But once that's out of there,
It's just
just a big open hole where anything could come up and filter out into the groundwater or any other sort of formation that allows for fluids to travel in it.
Is there a stat somewhere that shows this where the casing's been brought out and it's just an open pit?
No.
No.
You don't know.
No.
But this is not uncommon. Let me just say that. This is not, matter of fact, we're gonna go look at another one this exactly like this, only worse.
Worse?
Yes,
How does it get worse than this?
it's
Steve.
worse. You'll notice it when you see it. It's one of those where you walk up to and you take a step back.
For years, scientists have studied what these forgotten wells really mean to the environment, and furthermore, for the communities and the people around them. What kind of impact are they really having?
Research we've done, other folks have done, has shown that orphan wells can stand in the way of kids going to school, of drinking water that is potable, and redevelopment that can transpire, and property that is undervalued. And farmers especially find these wells extremely problematic because they feel like they didn't have anything to do with them, but they're on their property and it's going to cost them tens of thousands to deal with. So the implications are real and they've always been there. But I think there's a broader recognition that some of these wells are very hazardous, and we just didn't know that before, I think.
On Steve's property, we make our way to the final well, for him, one of the worst. And it shows you could easily trip and fall over an orphan well just like this.
It is another one of these open holes with no casing in it, just open to the fresh water vein.
So you put something over this one, I see.
Right, we put a drum in that just to protect it so nothing gets down it. So you can see that's a gaping hole.
Whoa!
Right.
How deep does this go?
I mean, I don't know, wells typically in this area are, 1,200-1,300 feet deep. So, who knows how deep it goes to, but one of the things you can do is you can actually drop a stone or something down the well and you can actually hear it go down and hit. So we'll drop it. So that's going down there, a few hundred feet for sure.
Whoa! It's a good thing you guys put this because, that is so dangerous.
That's scary dangerous, yes.
Here's why plugging these wells is much more complicated than you may think.
And the problem is if you weren't educated as to how these wells are actually constructed and like what the dangers could be at the subsurface, your immediate reaction to this is just fill the hole in, right?
Yeah.
But all that you're doing then is creating another blockage that if something happened down there where gas or oil started wanting to come to surface, now that you've created this artificial barrier on top of it, it's just going to push that out into
You've
wherever
essentially
we'll take
put a
it.
cork in the top of it by pushing dirt in on it, and then it forces the gas or oil or brine water out into the fresh water vein.
Protecting land like this is more than a job for Zefiro. And for Luke, personally, it's a mission rooted in family history. Growing up in the family business, he saw the impact of orphan wells firsthand, and he learned that there is a way to do something about it. Today, that experience drives the company's commitment to restore and preserve nature.
Yeah, I was probably around 12 or 13 when I was on my first site. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of evolution, I would say, over the last 25 years that I've been either full-time or somewhat involved with the business.
How many people did it start with? Just two, right?
Yeah, so it started with 2. I think even at our peak, the most employees that we ever had was around 20 prior to 2018 when I sort of came on full-time. We have 160 employees now. We're adding, it feels like 10 a week at this point. So the business has definitely hit a stride at this moment.
And it keeps growing. As cleaning up orphan wells protects the environment, it also represents a growing industry. I had the chance to sit and talk with Catherine Flack, CEO of Zefiro. She explains to me that as governments invest billions to support companies like Zefiro that are proving that environmental restoration and economic opportunity can go, in fact, hand in hand. Because let's be honest, the threat that orphan wells pose is very real.
One way of thinking about that is if people are concerned about carbon dioxide, the analogy would be carbon dioxide is like high blood pressure, methane or other super pollutants is like a heart attack. And so sometimes you'll hear a story, maybe in Texas, maybe in Pennsylvania, of a home exploding. Very often that's because there's methane that's leaking and somebody, lights a match.
What if this was around a playground that my child or my grandchild was? What if this is under my house? What if this is by my school? What if all these things? There's so many what ifs right here. How serious is an orphan well problem across North America right now? Let's put that into perspective.
So, it's an extremely serious problem. I think, as mentioned, 14 million Americans live within a mile of a leaking well. So your example of what if my grandchild's school is near an orphan well, there's a fairly large probability that it is. That's a huge issue. And so from a health perspective, from a value of my home perspective, there's a lot of reasons why this is getting so much attention, why corporations and governments are really focused on this. And again, $4.7 billion was allocated by the federal government. That covers about 2% of the estimated cost of abating all the orphan wells in the United States. So it's a drop in the bucket. It's a good start, but there's a lot of more work to do. That's part of why, from a business case perspective, I'm really excited about this, because there aren't that many opportunities in life to be able to have the opportunity to address a real problem, make the world better, but also the total addressable market here commercially is massive. And the reality is my grandchildren's grandchildren will still be dealing with this problem.
And these are the heroes that make it all happen. Behind every sealed well is a team of highly trained specialists. The work demands far more than just heavy equipment. Every site requires careful planning and expertise to solve problems that can change from one well to the next. Above all, strict safety procedures are in full effect.
Right here's a main muster area right here. We'll muster there, count heads, make sure everybody's accounted for. If something does happen, you'll hear 3 loud beeps on the horn. So when you hear that, don't run, walk safely to where that muster area is.
Hidden beneath this rig that looks just like one that is used for drilling is an abandoned well that was just sitting under pressure when the crew arrived on site. And before any restoration could begin, that pressure had to be brought under control.
That's right here, yeah. That's the wellhead. That's where all our tubing's going down from up top here, going down the hole. When we got here, we had all the containment was laid. We rigged the rig up, spotted all our equipment, killed the well. It had 712 pounds on it when we got here. We got it down to 0, that way we were able to work on it.
Most of the men working here have years of experience in the oil and gas drilling sector. The standards for plugging wells have evolved dramatically over the years. Luke explains that decades ago, plugging a well often meant little more than pouring a few bags of cement down the hole and hoping for the best.
So for as crude as that sounds, that's still really far advanced from how many wells were plugged over the last century. Many of them had a cannonball shoved down into the well bore. Some of them would take a tree stump and just shove it down as far as it would go. And as we know now, that is not how these wells should be properly decommissioned.
It's maybe not the best.
It's a little suspect.
No 2 wells are the same. Each one requires its own engineering plan and a specifically designed cement mixture prepared on site and pumped deep underground to create a permanent seal that will last.
So right now we are pumping a cement plug in this well.
What does that mean? Unpack that for us.
So a An oil or a gas well is sort of just a cylinder drilled into the ground, right, to a certain depth where you are going to try to extract hydrocarbons from a target formation called a pay zone. What we're ultimately trying to do is seal the flow of those hydrocarbons from that pay zone from moving vertically or horizontally, even worse. When we pump cement in the well, all that we're trying to do is seal off those exposed zones where any oil or gas might continue to be able to seep into that well, which is, as you may guess, a lot better than a tree stump.
Each well is sealed in carefully engineered stages, with multiple cement barriers placed at precise depths. Piece by piece, like drilling in reverse, the crew also has to remove the old steel tubing from the well. If it is in good condition, they clean it and recycle it. All this hard work, the training of the personnel and the equipment, makes plugging wells very expensive. This can add up to million-dollar price tags per site. Depending on the condition of the well, the Zefiro crew's work can take anywhere from a week to several months.
And then ultimately we'll be cutting and burying that well below ground with a steel cap welded on.
Once all is said and done, will the agriculture start growing back, or is it contaminated?
No, everything will, we actually, as part of the restoration process, we'll do a finish grade on the area that was impacted, and then we will plant native seed here so that all of the original flora sort of comes back to life. You'll see basically this field, you wouldn't even know that something was there.
By that time, the Zefiro crew will have removed a stain in nature few people knew even existed.
7 years ago, before the pandemic started, almost no one knew about orphan wells at all. It was not part of the national policy conversation, and now it is. It is burst onto the scene as a major topic. When people hear about it, they're upset. Whether they support the oil and gas industry or not, whether they believe in climate change or not, everyone knows that you're supposed to clean up your mess when you're done.
Cleaning up orphaned and abandoned wells, I think, allows us to accomplish multiple tasks simultaneously that help improve the lives of people in these areas. This includes improving the air we breathe, the water we drink, the land we use for recreation or development, and the jobs that we need in rural and often economically distressed places. So to me, it's a great case of a massive win-win for industry, landowners, farmers, residents, our economy, and our environment.
I think that we have kind of cracked this issue open, and it's only a matter of time before we solve it.
With their determination and experience, Zefiro will definitely be at the center of the solution.
Have you ever come across a well where you're like, we can't get here? What are we to do here?
No, our mantra has always been, we will find a way, we will figure it out. So in some cases, it does require that you spend as much money on the access road itself as you do plugging the well. Yeah. But in other ways, the way that we have built our sort of small modular orphan well plugging packages are such that you can get into really difficult spots that most other companies just don't have the equipment or the knowledge to be able to access.
So good. Wow. Well, take a look at that. The orphan well crisis didn't begin overnight, and it's certainly not going to be solved overnight. However, through this journey, we've been able to see that solutions do exist. From the crew in the field to the leadership team driving the vision, Zefiro has been able to prove that environmental responsibility and economic opportunity don't need to be at odds. You see, this isn't really a story just about methane or about orphan wells or even about carbon credits. It's about cleaning up what was left behind, about taking responsibility and creating a future that is much cleaner. And the only question left is how quickly we can get there.